a strange name for the affliction, as it were. But how would you describe that?
Yeah, it is the shin. I don't know what the splint reference has to do with anything, but it's the inside, the medial side of the shin that gets very inflamed as the muscles that attach on that part of the shin, as they get stressed and pulled from a mechanical dysfunction with the foot strike when somebody's running, and that causes a little bit of there's a membrane around the bone called the periosteum, and that membrane starts to pull away a little bit with repeated stress, and you get a little inflammation in there, and that little bit of swelling between the bone and the membrane causes this pain. And but the real issue is the mechanical reason why this happens, and trying to correct that.
I was going to ask you, I mean, this is usually a repeat. Runners have this a lot, but
yes.
Can this be done by one foul strike or one or two times rather than over and over?
No, this is really a repetitive injury, and the long-term consequence of continued repetitive injury on the shin bone is a stress fracture. So you can go from shin splints to now a stress fracture, and a stress fracture is a crack that if you keep putting pressure on it, then it will cleanly break, and now you've got a real issue. So stress fractures have to be treated very aggressively with a lot of rest until the bone reheals. But shin splints are common. I had them in high school, and most people know what they feel like.
Yeah, it's painful. So what do we do besides rest? I mean, that's the ultimate, right?
Yeah, the body's telling you there's an inflammatory problem, and you've got to correct it. And the best thing to do is rest. But the most important thing to do is understand the mechanical reason why it occurred. It can occur with anybody, anybody that's got really good mechanics and is very athletic just naturally. If they start to overdo a running or an exercise program with jumping, you can develop shin splints. But so it's got to be a gradual, progressive kind of training program so that you avoid that. But certain people have more of a problem. And I was on an airplane once, and I sat next to a guy, and we just struck up a conversation. And he was affiliated with the Pittsburgh Steelers and knew a lot of the football players there. And he showed me on his laptop the software package. He said, I was just at the Arizona Cardinals training camp, and I was filming these athletes running, and with my camera, and I have this software package that takes that film and converts it into a 3D mechanical illustration of what's happening with their foot strike when they're running. So he said, I can tell when a player is spraining their ankle. I can look at the mechanics, and I can see how long their heel is on the ground and how long they get to the toe off. And at any different angle. It was really amazing. It was a very high technology analysis of the foot strike. And so he was building orthotics for these athletes. So kind of a deep backdrop that sort of gave me a little bit better understanding what's happening. When we're walking, we usually step forward and it's heel to toe. Mm-hmm. But when we're running, it's almost a flat foot strike, and it should be right below our hip. And so we have these arches, and the arches act as a little shock absorber. But some people don't have a good arch, so if their foot kind of collapse. And if you can imagine what's happening, if you just like if you're at a swimming pool and you walk on the sidewalk, walk with wet feet, and you look at your footprint, you'll see the heel on the outside of the foot and then the front of the foot, the toes. And that's really when we're running, that's what that foot strike should look like. It's almost heel and arch at the same time, but then we kind of roll our foot to the outside of the foot and then come around and roll inwards, and we go toe off with the big toe as the last toe to touch. But if we have a weak arch or other mechanical problems, instead of the foot rolling a little bit, putting pressure on the outside, it rolls on the inside. So it's almost like the inside of the foot is on the ground, the outside of the foot is lifted off the ground and pushing away. And it's that stress structure that kind of pulls the knee inwards, and it stresses the muscles that attach on the shin bone. It's hard to describe it with words. It's much easier with a picture, but hopefully that makes sense. So what we have to do is correct the mechanical problem. If you've got tight hip flexors, the muscles that lift your hip up and down, that will tend to pull your foot inward and to put more stress on the shin. If you've got weak gluteal muscles, that can also do that. And then there's some people, if you've seen some people that have bow knees, and then other people have the opposite, where they have what we call a valgus deformity, where their knees kind of come together and their feet go out. That's the image or the picture of someone who's going to have shin splints, because when the foot strikes, the knee's on the inside and the foot is pushing away, and it shouldn't push away, it should push forward. That's what's going to cause it. So all those things have to be corrected mechanically, stretching the hip flexors, doing glute exercises, strength the gluteal muscles, and then learning the proper mechanics of the foot strike. So I ran cross country in high school. I ran with a heel, toe kind of a thing. It'd take a long step, stride, and heel, toe. I didn't learn until many years later that that's very poor mechanics, because if you hit the ground with the force of your heel pushing down, physics says the ground is going to hit you with the same force backwards. So you're going to strike the ground's going to push you back a little bit. Whereas if you hit your foot straight down underneath your hip with a nice arch, you're going to get a little spring as you go down and load that foot, and then it's going to push you up. And with a slight forward lean, you're going to look like you're bounding like a deer or an animal that runs fast.
Yeah, it's making you faster and keeping you more healthy.
Right. And the key, what determines the speed of an individual? Oh, it's their nervous system and how fast the nerves conduct the current and the signal to the muscles. But this gentleman I was talking to said it's all about their foot speed, their foot strike. How long from the time their foot hits the ground to the time their toe leaves the ground determines their speed. And so that can be that you can train to be faster, obviously, become more flexible and stronger in your muscles. Clearly, you have to have strong gluteal muscles, really good hip flexors, and strong hamstrings if you want to really have a good stride and a good, strong sprint.
Maybe this is a sports coaching question instead of doctor, but is it easy to change your gait if you're already a runner?
Great question. And I'll tell you, when I was researching this, what I learned about was barefoot running. So if you try running on the sidewalk barefoot, you'll quickly learn what's the most comfortable foot strike. If you're hitting your heel first on the sidewalk, it's going to really pound and be uncomfortable. If you're hitting your toes first with your heel up and your toes down, that's going to be really hard. So the best way, if you're running on the sidewalk barefoot, is to hit your foot almost at the same time simultaneously and then spring up. And that allows that arch to give you a little bit of that shock absorption. And then it pushes you up. So you push the ground down, straight down. The ground pushes you straight up, but with a slight forward lean, it makes you go forward.
Makes me wonder, they make shoes with heel strikes, which you shouldn't need.
Right.
Do they ever make them with, I don't know what you call outside of little toe strikes?
Yeah. I don't, excuse me, I don't know, but what they typically do is supply arch supports. And, if you put an arch support in, it's going to make your foot less likely to rotate in and to keep it nice and flat when you're going through that heel to toe strike.
So we're back to the orthotics then.
Back to orthotics, back to correcting mechanics, relative rest. If you can imagine, if you do a lot of hill sprints, going up and down hill, that's a up on your toes kind of a maneuver. You're taking away the arches as a part of that natural support, so you're going to be more likely to develop shin splints if you're doing a lot of hill work, which when I was in cross country, we did that, but it wasn't our primary exercise. And the other thing we were talking about before we came on the air is the importance of coaches understanding this type of a mechanical issue and not pushing every athlete through the same routine. My son was having foot pain, and he just thought it was a sore foot, and eventually he got it checked out, and it was a stress fracture. And he was playing football. Hadn't played football for many years. In his senior year, he started playing, and a lot of running on pretty hard surfaces. And he just kept pushing through it because they're blowing the whistle and telling him to go. Yeah. It becomes a stress fracture. So every athlete has to be trained different, and you've got to understand the mechanics of their running form and where their inherent weaknesses are. And you can't put every athlete through the same routine, although that's typically what coaches do.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how. I've seen this in athletes who are doing field events like pole vault or high jump. The coach will have them do sprints because they're really sprinters and jumpers. And then after they do the sprint workout, they go and they do their event. Well, then they don't have any spring left. They don't have any energy. So their form is going to be terrible. I mean, the sprint workout should always come after the primary event that they're training. And the mistake I made my senior year as a pole vaulter was I trained too hard up until the week of the district. I overtrained. So by the time I got there, my legs were dead and I wasn't feeling sharp and like I was fast and springing a lot. So you have to listen to your body, whether you're a weekend warrior or a high school or college athlete. You've got to understand when the body's telling you slow down and rest a little bit. And that's hard for a lot of people that are really motivated to do that.
Yeah. And a lot of schools have trainers. If you can go to the trainer maybe and describe that you think this may be coming on, they should tape under your arches, which is the temporary orthotic.
That's exactly what they do. They tape the arches, try to pull it up, and that's what I had in high school. So that's a common way to try to alleviate the pressure and stress on it with overuse injuries. But again, it's why did I get this to begin with? And sometimes people will get it on one side. If you only have shin splints on one side, that's telling you there's a real mechanical issue on that side. You've got to correct it. So you got to go to somebody that understands the mechanics. Orthopedist, orthopedic doctor, orthopedic surgeon, a good chiropractor, sometimes physical therapist, sometimes a sports medicine doctor. But if you're going to a provider who's telling you something that doesn't make sense, or that you try that advice and it doesn't work, go to somebody, get another opinion, because it can really delay the recovery if you're not doing the right things.
Well, as a former sufferer as you are, you will know if it's working or not by the pain level in your shin.
Yes, absolutely. And when I start to have Achilles tendonitis or start to have problems with the arch of my foot, I go see Dr. Jakubowski, and he strips the scar tissue out, puts me through a range of motion that's the full range of motion like it's supposed to move, and restores the mechanics pretty easily. But it's not always comfortable, but it's critical that we correct our mechanical issues.
Well, you got to heal.
Exactly.
So that's the only way to get that done. All right. Well, let's hope that you or I or anybody else stays away from the shin splint from now on. So appreciate it, as always, Dr. Tim McKnight this morning on our Talk with the Doc.